Hello students, I am R. Mukherjee. Students, I have already sent you 2 videos on this topic, resources and development. I have already explained what is resource, what types of resource, and what is natural resource and classification of natural resources. So if you have not seen those videos, please see and then you see this video. Now in this video, we are going to study about who owns the natural resources and what is human relationship with the natural resources. So we are also going to study about how the tribal society, how does tribal society view natural resources and how does industrial society view natural resources. So the vital question is, who owns natural resources? We know that today we have elected democratic government all over the world. We also have democratic government. We have parliament to make laws and policies. And we also have international laws and policies. So on the basis of these laws, according to these national and international laws, resources can be divided into 4 groups. First is individual resource, next community resource, then national and international resource. These are 4 groups. So what is individual resource? Your house or land which is owned by you is called individual resource. But suppose there is a park in your colony where you live. That park is not individual resource because that is owned by the whole community. So park or community hall, etc., are community resource. Then the national resource, the forests, the land or the mountains, rivers in a political territory of a country, within the boundary of a country, is owned by the government of that country. So that is called national resource. And then comes the international resource. So international resource is the oceans, particularly the oceans. All the oceans are actually international resource because the oceans can be used by any country. So these are 4 different categories of natural resources on the basis of ownership. But now the question is, who owned the natural resources 10,000 years ago in Neolithic period? That is very important questions. कि आज से 10,000 साल पहले जब Neolithic period start हुआ, उस समय natural resources पर किसका ownership था? Because you know that we didn't have the government at that time. There was no king or landlord even. So who owned these resources? So that is a very important question. And what was the relationship between human society and natural resources 10,000 years ago? So ये जो सवाल है, these are very important questions. So we are going to learn about these points. How has the relationship between human society and natural resources changed over the last 10,000 years? पिछले 10,000 सालों में मनुष्य और प्राकृतिक संसाधन का जो रिलेशनशिप है वो कैसे परिवर्तित हुआ है? How do tribal societies view natural resources or wealth, and how do they utilize these resources? जो आदिवासी समाज है उनका नज़रिया क्या है प्राकृतिक संसाधन के प्रति और वो इनका इस्तेमाल किस तरह करते हैं? Then how does industrial society view natural resource does it use the resources in the same way that tribal societies do? So, जो औद्योगिक समाज है वो इन प्राकृतिक संसाधनों को किस नज़रिए से देखता है और उसका इस्तेमाल कैसे करता है? सो ये कुछ बहुत ही महत्वपूर्ण सवाल हैं जिसका उत्तर हम समझने की कोशिश करेंगे इस वीडियो में. Okay, children. Now, just as I have already described earlier about what is natural resource and what is the meaning of natural resource. So, how does natural resource or become resource? How does natural wealth become resource, and what do we mean by natural resource? So, I have already explained the meaning of these questions. I have given the answer in my previous video. So, if you see the previous video, you will find the answers of these questions. Okay. Now, the question is that you know that during the Neolithic period, the people acquired, new skills and technologies. People acquired new skills and technologies 10,000 years ago during the Neolithic period. Okay, and actually the people started using and converting natural resources in a big way some 10,000 years ago. And this resource mobilization began during the Neolithic period, and that is why this period is also called Neolithic Revolution period. Okay, so you will have to understand that. And as the importance of natural resources in human life grew, the questions arose that who should control them, how should they be used, and who should benefit from their use. So, जैसे जैसे ये मनुष्य प्राकृतिक संसाधनों का इस्तेमाल बड़े पैमाने पे करना शुरू किया, तो जो इम्पोर्टेंस है नेचुरल रिसोर्सेज का वो ह्यूमन लाइफ में बढ़ता चला गया. और जब ऐसा हुआ तो एक सवाल पैदा हुआ कि इन प्राकृतिक संसाधनों पर किसका कंट्रोल हो, ओनरशिप किसका हो, ये पहला सवाल. एंड द नेक्स्ट क्वेश्चन वाज दैट हाउ शुड दे बी यूटिलाइज्ड, हाउ शुड दे बी यूज्ड, एंड थर्ड वाज दैट हु शुड गेट बेनिफिट और हु शुड benefit from their use. So these were the three very important questions. But different human society or communities at different time period answered these questions in a different way. अलग अलग समय में अलग अलग जो समाज थे उन्होंने इसका उत्तर अलग तरीके से दिया. And the different perspective of natural wealth and environment gradually changed the relationship between the human society and the natural resources over the last 10,000 years. So, but before we go into that topic to understand that what was the view of the tribal society towards the natural resources or the view of industrial society, here I would like to mention the view of the father of the nation, Mahatma Gandhi, about natural resource and sustainable development. If you see in Mahatma Gandhi's words, what he said, I have written here. Yes. Now, in his words, Mahatma Gandhi's words, the earth provides enough to satisfy every man's need, but not any man's greed. I repeat, the earth provides enough to satisfy every man's need, but not any man's greed. Mahatma Gandhi के विचार के अनुसार उनकी जो आइडिया था वो ये था कि ये जो प्रकृति है, ये जो पृथ्वी है, ये हमें हमारी आवश्यकताओं को पूर्ण करने के लिए पर्याप्त संसाधन उपलब्ध कराता है, परंतु हमारी लालच को पूर्ण करने के लिए नहीं है पर्याप्त। तब फिर ये पर्याप्त नहीं होगा। और ये इम्पॉर्टेंट इसलिए है, ये देखिए इसका कितना रिलेवेंस है आज की तारीख में। आपको ये बाद में थोड़ा यू विल अंडरस्टैंड इट लिटिल लेटर, सो जस्ट कीप इट इन माइंड व्हाट ही सेड। ओके, नाउ लेट अस सी how the tribal society view natural resources, or what were their ideas 10,000 years ago even. So, long ago there was no government. As you know, that during that period, we are talking about Neolithic period, there was no government, no law, no king, no landlords. So at that time, the tribal society, the tribal community enjoyed the collective rights to natural resources, on natural resources. And not only that, they framed, here you will find it in this line, they framed the community laws and rules to utilize them judiciously. And we can see it even today. और ये सिर्फ उस समय नहीं है, ये आज भी हम देख सकते हैं। यदि हम आज आदिवासी इलाकों में जाएं, यानी कि जो रिमोट प्लेसेस हैं, जो फॉरेस्ट एरियाज़ में ट्राइबल सोसाइटी रहते हैं, अगर हम वहाँ जाएं तो हम पाते हैं कि आज भी वो इस पर बिलीव करते हैं। द ट्राइबल सोसाइटीज़ live and interact with nature, and they never harm nature. Rather, they worship nature, and they worship natural forces. So, the question is, how does they view natural wealth or natural resources, or what was their perspective of the natural world? So, if we see, the long ago, tribal communities had the collective rights to natural resources. They made community laws and rules to utilize them judiciously. And how does tribal society view natural resources? So the question is that उनका एक्चुअली व्यू क्या था और आज क्या है? क्या आज भी वही व्यू है? Because here we said that long ago tribal communities had collective rights to natural resources. And we know that today they don't have the collective rights, because the right on the natural resources were taken away from that society, because we have the elected democratic government. So the government has the right. तो उनका अधिकार तो नहीं है, उनका अधिकार नहीं है, ओनरशिप नहीं है। जैसे हम जंगल की बात करें, फॉरेस्ट की बात करें, तो फॉरेस्ट पर उनका अधिकार नहीं है, बट वो यूटिलाइज करते हैं उसको अपनी कुछ ज़रूरतों को पूरा करने के लिए। पर उनका नज़रिया जो है वो 10,000 साल पहले जो था वो आज भी है, वो नहीं बदला है। और वो नज़रिया क्या है, वो व्यू क्या है उनका, वो उनका आउटलुक क्या है? तो ये देखिए यहाँ ये 3 पॉइंट्स आपको ये डिस्क्राइब कर देता है कि उनका व्यू पॉइंट क्या है। Now, tribal societies saw natural wealth as divine. This is very important. ईश्वरीय मानते थे वो प्रकृति और प्रकृति के जो भी संसाधन हैं उनको, कि ईश्वर प्रदत्त है। And for them, land, trees, animals, rivers, oceans, mountains were god and goddesses who provided them their livelihood. और उनका ये मानना है कि ये जो लैंड है, ट्रीज़ हैं, एनिमल्स हैं, ये सब गॉड एंड गॉडेसेस हैं और इनकी वो वर्शिप करते हैं, पूजा करते हैं, क्योंकि वो उन्हें लाइवलीहुड प्रोवाइड करता है. And according to their community law, this is very important. According to their community law, everyone had access to natural resources. But no one had the right to exploit them irrationally or irresponsibly. उनके जो सामुदायिक कानून है, उन्होंने जो समुदाय में जो कानून बनाया है, उसमें उन्होंने ये कहा कि ये जो नेचुरल रिसोर्सेज हैं, चाहे वो जंगल हो, ज़मीन हो, जो भी है, उस पर एक कलेक्टिव राइट होगा, समुदाय का, सबका अधिकार होगा, लेकिन वो उसको यूज़ भी कर सकते हैं अपने आवश्यकताओं को पूरा करने के लिए, लेकिन उसको वो एक्सप्लॉइट नहीं कर सकते हैं इरेस्पॉन्सिबली, और माइंडलेस एक्सप्लॉइटेशन उसका नहीं कर सकते हैं, वो कानून के ख़िलाफ़ होगा. So students, I hope that you understood this point. But later on, during the ancient and medieval period, particularly, the ownership changed, because with the advent of janpads and mahajanpads, which you have studied in history, flourished. Then the trade increased, art and culture flourished, and the kings and landlords started ruling the area or the country or the villages or the particular state. So the rights on the ownership on the natural resources went to the landlords and kings. So they took over, They had taken over their rights, the rights of the tribal society. And as a result, human productivity grew. People exploited resources. You can see here, you go through these lines. And they exploited resources in a complex way. But here I would like to mention that the natural resources or environment during the medieval and ancient period was not much harmed, because there was no large-scale production or you can say that there was no machine or no industrial revolution, So, because of that, the natural resources were not harmed. They were utilized in a limited way, and secondly, the societies during the ancient and medieval period had the same idea as the tribal societies had towards the natural resources. Okay, so they also worshipped natural resources. They also considered that the natural resources were divine. So there was no difference in their opinion of the kings and the landlords towards the natural resources. But the perspective of natural resources, took 360-degree turn 250 years ago, लगभग 250 वर्ष पहले. ये जो एक प्रकृति के प्रति जो ओपिनियन था, जो उसके विचार थे, वो पूरी तरह सिर के बल उलट जाना, जिसको हम कहते हैं 360-डिग्री टर्न हो गया. और ये टर्न क्यों हुआ? बिकॉज ऑफ इंडस्ट्रियल रेवोल्यूशन. द टोटल प्रोडक्शन सिस्टम वॉज चेंज्ड. जो उत्पादन का जो तरीका था वो तो टोटली चेंज हो जाता है. फैक्ट्रीज वर सेट अप to produce goods on large scale. These factories required huge quantities of raw materials and fuel. और इन फैक्ट्रीज़ को चलाने के लिए आपको मालूम है कि बड़े पैमाने पर raw materials and fuel की ज़रूरत थी, which led to the sharp rise of demand for natural resources. And this was the time when greed of the industrialists overpowered the logic of need. यहीं वो जो महात्मा गांधी ने कहा कि the earth provides everything sufficient to fulfill the need, but not to fulfill the greed. तो यहाँ पर जो इंडस्ट्रियल रेवोल्यूशन होता है, यहाँ जो इंडस्ट्रियलिस्ट हैं वो ग्रीडी हो जाते हैं और एक माइंडलेस एक्सप्लॉयटेशन स्टार्ट होता है नेचुरल रिसोर्सेज का. सो लेट अस अंडरस्टैंड व्हाट इज़ द व्यू ऑफ द industrial society about the natural resources. तो इंडस्ट्रियल सोसाइटी का व्यू क्या था और वो किस तरह ट्राइबल सोसाइटी से डिफरेंट था. लेट अस अंडरस्टैंड इट. So the industrial society believed that natural resources are inexhaustible and could be exploited limitlessly to increase productivity. इनका ये बिलीव था कि जो नेचुरल रिसोर्सेज हैं वो इनएग्जॉस्टिबल हैं, यानी वो कभी एग्जॉस्ट नहीं होंगे, वो कभी ख़त्म नहीं होंगे. इट विल नॉट फिनिश एंड कुड बी एक्सप्लॉयटेड, और इसका दोहन हम कर सकते हैं लिमिटलेसली, असीमित रूप से इसका इस्तेमाल कर सकते हैं टू इंक्रीज द प्रोडक्टिविटी. Second, they went to clear the forests to grow commercial crops and divert forest and agricultural land for mining and construction. So across the river they constructed dams also to generate electricity. And they began to colonize, and since they required huge quantity of raw materials, so they began to colonize across Asia, Africa, America to exploit natural resources of these countries. और ये जो इंडस्ट्रियल रेवोल्यूशन आप जानते हैं कि यूरोप में हुआ था, और यूरोपियन नेशंस ने ये अपने इंडस्ट्रीज़ को रन करने के लिए जो उनको रॉ मटेरियल्स की ज़रूरत थी या अन्य जो भी चीज़ों की ज़रूरत थी उसके लिए वो न सिर्फ अपने देश के नेचुरल रिसोर्सेस को एक्सप्लॉइट करना शुरू किया, बल्कि वो एशिया, अफ्रीका और अमेरिका में जाकर वहाँ के देशों पर कब्ज़ा किया और वहाँ से संसाधन एक्सप्लॉइट किया. और ये कहानी आप you will study about it in the next history lessons. Okay, and they began to colonize countries across Asia, America and Africa to exploit natural wealth of these countries. And the last point is the trade of natural resources was considered to correct the imbalance in availability of resources that resulted in the First World War and Second World War, apart from the severe damage to our environment. Actually जो natural resources हैं वो सभी parts of the world में equally available नहीं होता है, और इसी imbalance को ख़त्म करने के लिए इंडस्ट्रियल सोसाइटी ने ट्रेड को बढ़ावा दिया कि एक देश में जहाँ कोई चीज़ है तो उसको जिस देश में उसकी ज़रूरत है वहाँ ट्रेड के द्वारा उसको पहुँचा दिया जाए. और ये जो कारण था, इसके कारण वो कॉलोनाइज यानी इम्पीरियलिज़म का जो एक की शुरुआत होती है, दूसरे देशों पर जाकर कब्ज़ा करना, और ये इम्पीरियलिज़म जो है ये स्टार्ट होता है. और इसी का परिणाम होता है, इसी ग्रीड का परिणाम होता है दो विश्व युद्ध, फर्स्ट वर्ल्ड वार एंड सेकेंड वर्ल्ड वार, which we are going to study in the history lessons. आपके हिस्ट्री के लेसन्स में आप पढ़ने वाले हैं फर्स्ट वर्ल्ड वार एंड सेकेंड वर्ल्ड वार के बारे में. तो ये याद रखिए कि उसका सबसे बड़ा कारण इंडस्ट्रियल रेवोल्यूशन ही है, और उसके कारण जो ग्रीड बढ़ता है, जो इंडस्ट्रियल सोसाइटी का पर्सपेक्टिव नेचुरल रिसोर्सेज के प्रति जो चेंज होता है, और उसको वो मानते हैं कि ये इनएग्जॉस्टिबल है और इसका हम लिमिटलेसली यूज़ कर सकते हैं। तो इससे न सिर्फ सीवियर डैमेज होता है हमारे एनवायरनमेंट को, बल्कि 2 विश्व युद्ध हो जाते हैं। 2 world war happened due to this reason. So this you will have to understand. So now students, the today's last point I would like to discuss, that is the scientific perspective of the environment or the natural resources, कि what is the scientific perspective. Actually till 1950 हम अगर ये देखें कि 1950 तक the scientists have not said, had not said anything about the exploitation or mindless use of the natural resources. But after 1950, scientists have been raising questions about degradation of environment. And they said that environment, you will see in these paragraphs, you go through this paragraph, you will understand that environmental scientists say that our natural wealth is a vast and complex web in which damage to small segments, can impact the whole system. अगर एक जो हमारा जो नेचुरल एक्चुअली रिसोर्सेज है वो एक इंटरकनेक्टेड है, because it is both non-living and living things, and they are interconnected. So if a damage done to a small segment, a part of that system, then it is going to harm the whole system of natural or environment. The industrialization and mindless use of natural resources resulted in environmental pollution. और ये pollution you will find, you just go through this paragraph, you will understand how this mindless use of natural resources harmed the environment and caused different kind of pollution. But another point is that the indiscriminate use of resources which will deplete them permanently, because there are some resources which are renewable resources. For example, water, I have explained it. But there are some resources which are non-renewable. So if we do not use it judiciously, we are going to completely finish these resources, and this will deplete permanently. There will be no iron ore or no coal or mineral oil for the coming generations. So that is very important point. So we should think of sustainable development and management of resources, and that is why the scientists have been raising questions on this, and the governments are doing planning to check the indiscriminate or mindless use of these resources. And they also, we are also planning to manage these resources in a very wise way, wisely, so that we can save some non-renewable resources for the next coming generation. Now we will study about what is the meaning of sustainable development and the management of resources. We'll discuss about this topic in the next video. So thank you, children. Thank you, students.